When a little girl walks into a high-rise job interview carrying only her mother's notebook, the cold-hearted CEO thinks it's a mistake until her quiet words begin to unravel a past he buried long ago. What started as an interview became the beginning of a second chance neither of them saw coming. The morning had already dragged on for Ethan Ward. Another interview, another handshake, another perfectly rehearsed answer from someone who wanted the title more than the work. Outside his corner office windows, the city moved without emotion, steel gray skies pressing down on crowds that didn't look up. That was how Ethan liked it. Quiet, predictable, distant. He glanced at the list on his desk. One more name, Claire Summers. No resume attached. Just a handwritten note from his assistant that said, "She called this morning. Desperate. Single mother." Ethan sighed, already dismissing her. He didn't have time for desperation. A knock at the door. He didn't look up. "Come in." Silence followed. No heels clicking, no breathless greeting, just a small sound like the scrape of fabric against leather. Then a voice, soft, clear. "Excuse me, sir, my mom's sick, so I came instead." Ethan lifted his eyes slowly. She couldn't have been more than 7. The girl stood there in oversized sneakers, a faded red coat buttoned unevenly, and a ponytail that leaned to one side. She clutched a manila envelope to her chest, her fingers pink from the cold. "What is this?" Ethan asked, flatly. "Where's your mother?" "She's at home," the girl said. "She couldn't get up this morning. She hasn't been able to for a few days, but she really wanted this job. So I thought I should come. I know all about her." He leaned back in his chair, unsure whether to call security or just send her away gently. But there was something in the way she stood, not bold, but not afraid, not asking for pity, just trying. Ethan motioned to the chair across from him. "What's your name, Lily?" "Lily, this is a job interview. For grown-ups." You understand that? She nodded. "I do. But Mom says when something matters, you show up." "So I showed up." He raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly do you want me to do? Hire your mother based on what you say?" Lily hesitated, then opened the envelope. Inside was a single worn notebook, edges curled, pages bent, a few of them stained with what looked like tea. She placed it on the desk, gently. "This is my mom's notebook. She said she writes everything in here. Her ideas, her schedules, even things she'd say in meetings. You can read it. I thought you might want to know who she is when she's not sick." Ethan flipped it open. The handwriting was small and neat. Lists of tasks, budget outlines, marketing sketches. Some pages full of quiet thoughts about trying to keep going when you're tired. He stopped at one paragraph scribbled in the margins. "I can't afford to fail again. Lily deserves better than this version of me. If I could just catch a break." He closed the notebook. "You understand I can't hire someone without meeting them." "I know," Lily said. "But maybe you'll want to meet her after you read that. She's really smart. She works hard, even when she can't get out of bed. She doesn't complain. She just tries. All the time." The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. He studied the girl across from him. Small hands, wide eyes. No sign of fear, only hope. Not for herself, for her mother. He had seen ambition before. He had seen greed, manipulation, flattery. But this was different. There was no angle, just a child showing up, because it mattered. Ethan stood slowly. "All right. You can leave the notebook and tell your mom I'll be in touch." Lily nodded once, then back toward the door. She paused before opening it. "Thank you for not laughing." He said nothing, just watched her walk away, the door clicking softly shut behind her. And for the first time in years, the silence in Ethan Ward's office didn't feel peaceful. It felt unsettling. Ethan didn't read the notebook that night. He told himself he was too busy. Deadlines, emails, shareholder calls. But the truth sat quietly at the edge of his desk, the tattered notebook unopened, like a question he didn't want to answer. The next morning, it was still there. He stared at it over his black coffee. He thought about the girl Lily, her coat too small, her backpack with one broken strap, and those eyes that didn't ask for anything, only offered something honesty. By mid-morning, he flipped the cover open again. The pages were ordinary at first. To-do lists, reminders, client notes written in a rush. But as he read further, it began to shift paragraphs that unfolded into something deeply personal. Scribbled affirmations, "You're not failing, you're tired." Bits of prayers, plans written, crossed out, rewritten again. There were ideas for efficiency strategies, team leadership models, even mock proposals for companies Ethan recognized from his own portfolio. And each idea was practical, clear, thoughtful, like someone who had never been given the luxury to guess. He paused at a folded sheet wedged between the pages. It was a hand-drawn budget grocery list with margins calculated down to the cent. Rent, electricity, insulin, school supplies. There was no category for emergencies. He closed the notebook carefully. That afternoon, Ethan called his assistant. "Did Claire Summers reschedule?" "No, sir." "No call." "And the little girl, did you get her contact? She left a number for emergencies?" "I can try it." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Do that." Later that evening, he sat alone in his penthouse, watching the city lights flicker below. All the signs of success were around him, floor-to-ceiling windows. Imported wine, a fireplace that lit with a remote. But in the quiet, his thoughts returned to Lily's voice, small, calm, but carrying something heavier than a child should. He remembered her shoes, worn soles, one lace tied in a double knot, as if it had broken too many times. That night, he dreamt not of boardrooms or deals, but of a boy no one remembered. A boy who also once walked into a room, hoping someone might see something more than what was missing. When he woke, the sky outside was still dark. He picked up his phone. "Get me Claire Summers' address. I want to see her." The assistant stammered. "Sir, personally, yes. And call a driver." He didn't say why, didn't need to. Sometimes a stranger walks in and leaves the room unchanged. But sometimes, rarely, they leave something behind. And that something starts to pull at everything you thought you knew. Ethan wasn't sure what it meant yet, but he wasn't going to ignore it anymore. The building was smaller than Ethan expected, brick, weather-worn, with cracked steps and a rusting mailbox stuffed with leaflets, the kind of place most people walk past without looking twice. His driver offered to wait, but Ethan waved him off. He stood there for a moment, notebook in hand, not entirely sure what he was doing. It wasn't in his nature to show up unannounced, especially not at strangers' doors. But something about that little girl's quiet resolve, it had gotten under his skin. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, more gently this time. He heard faint movement shuffling behind the door. Then a tired voice. "I'm not buying anything. I'm not selling," Ethan said. A pause. Then the door creaked open a few inches. A woman stood behind it, hair pulled back, skin pale, eyes wary. She leaned on the frame for balance. Thin, too thin. Claire Summers. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes moved to the notebook in his hand. Recognition flickered. "You're the CEO." He nodded. "Ethan Ward." She opened the door wider, still bracing herself. Did she really go Lily? She did. Claire's shoulders sank, not in shame, but in something deeper. Exhaustion. Worry. I told her not to. She said she had to try. She did more than try. He offered the notebook. Claire took it with trembling fingers. "I didn't know she took this. She said you needed the job." Claire looked down. "I need a lot of things. Doesn't mean I expect them." "I read it," Ethan said. "All of it." Her head lifted slightly. "And you're sharp, focused. Your notes are better than some of the reports I get from executives earning six figures." Claire didn't smile. "I've had time to think. When you're sick and broke, you think a lot." He studied her face lines that didn't belong to someone her age. Eyes that had learned to hide fear quickly. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't performing. She was surviving. "I came to offer you the job," Ethan said. "Executive assistant, salary, benefits, full medical." Claire's grip on the notebook tightened. "Is this a pity hire?" she asked. "No." "Then why come here? You're not the kind of man who chases candidates to their doors." He hesitated. "Because your daughter walked into my office with more conviction than most grown men. Because you wrote things in this notebook that no one trained you to write, but they're right. And because I think you're exactly the kind of person this company needs." Claire stepped back slowly, allowing him a clearer view into the apartment. It was small, clean, lived in. A drawing of a sun hung crookedly on the wall, Lily written in blocky letters underneath. "I'm not a project," she said softly. "I'm not looking for someone to rescue me." Ethan's voice dropped. "I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm offering you a seat at the table. The rest is up to you." Claire lowered her eyes and then nodded once. "I'll think about it." "Fair." He turned to leave, but paused at the threshold. "She said thank you, you know, before she left." Claire blinked. "She did. She said, 'Thank you for not laughing.'" Claire looked away. "She's been laughed at before." She whispered. Ethan nodded once, then stepped into the hall. He didn't look back, but he didn't need to. Something had shifted in that room, a quiet weight lifted. Not because problems disappeared, but because someone finally listened. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan didn't feel like the one giving something. He felt like the one receiving it. The next morning, Claire stood at the edge of Ethan Ward's towering office building. She looked small against the backdrop of glass and steel, the city rushing around her like she didn't exist. Her clothes were clean but plain. Her shoulders were straight, but her legs trembled under her jeans. She almost didn't go in. Twice. She turned back toward the street, but the weight of Lily's faith pushed her forward. Inside, and the receptionist looked her over, hesitated, then led her upstairs. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have. When the doors opened, Ethan was already waiting. He didn't smile. He didn't offer her coffee. He just nodded and motioned her into his office. Claire stepped in. The room was pristine, wide, silent, expensive. Everything she had never known. She crossed her arms over her chest as if to hold herself together. "You didn't have to come," Ethan said, closing the door behind her. "I did." There was no small talk, no easing into the moment. Claire had no time for games, and Ethan respected that. He walked to the desk and picked up a folder. "I meant what I said yesterday." He began. "This isn't charity. This is recognition. You're organized, clear, efficient. You know how to prioritize, and you think 10 steps ahead. I've worked with people who have degrees from Ivy League schools who don't write like you do. Claire didn't move. I haven't worked in 5 years. I've been cleaning houses. Before that, I ran scheduling for a company that doesn't exist anymore. My resume is embarrassing. Your notebook wasn't. Silence. I don't do handouts. Ethan continued. I don't hire people to feel better about myself. If I bring you in, it's because you're valuable to the company, because you've already done more with less than most people do with everything. She swallowed hard. I don't know if I can keep up. I mean, I want to, but I still have days I can't get out of bed. I'm getting better, but it's slow. There's no guarantee. I'm not asking for guarantees. I'm asking for effort and boundaries. You need to tell me what you can handle, and I'll hold you to that. No more, no less. Claire's voice cracked. Why are you doing this? Ethan paused. His answer came quieter than expected. Because someone once did something for me when I didn't deserve it, and I didn't forget. She sat down slowly. Her hands trembled in her lap. You should know, I won't let Lily be disappointed. If I say yes, I mean it. I'll work like hell. Ethan reached across the desk, set the contract in front of her. That's all I need to hear. She took the pen, her signature shaky but deliberate. When she finished, she looked up. I don't know what happens next. You come in Monday, Nina, I'll have HR walk you through everything. Claire stood, nodded, then hesitated. I don't need special treatment, she said. You won't get any, Ethan replied, but you'll get respect. She held his gaze for a moment longer, then left, quietly. Ethan sat back in his chair once the door closed. He wasn't sure what had just happened, but the weight in his chest, the one he'd carried for years, felt a little lighter. It wasn't the hire that changed anything. It was the yes that echoed long after she left the room. It was Thursday afternoon when Ethan returned to his office and found a child sitting on the couch outside his door. Lily. She swung her legs lightly above the floor, holding a small book in her lap, Charlotte's Web. He noticed. Ethan paused. Where's your mother? She had a follow-up appointment. She didn't want to take me with her in case it took too long. She said I could wait here if your people were okay with it. He looked toward his assistant's desk. Empty. She's on her lunch break, Lily offered, without being asked. Ethan sighed but opened the door to his office. Come in. You can sit quietly. Just don't touch anything. Lily followed him inside, her small footsteps soft against the polished floors. She climbed into one of the leather chairs like it was too big for her and placed her book down, but didn't open it. She was watching him. Ethan sat behind his desk and opened his laptop, but after 2 sentences, he could feel her eyes still on him. What he asked, not looking up. Do you live here? No. Then why does it look like no one else ever comes here? He blinked. It's a workspace. Don't you get lonely? The question hit him sharper than it should have. He glanced at her. Her face was calm, honest. She wasn't trying to poke. She was genuinely curious. I'm busy. She nodded like that made sense. My mom's busy too, but she still hugs me. You don't have any pictures here. Ethan leaned back, folding his arms. That's not your business. Lily looked down. Sorry. A silence passed. Then, gently, did you have a family? The words slipped out so softly he wasn't sure she even meant to say them aloud. He swallowed. A long time ago. She looked up at him. Did they leave? He didn't answer. Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know what to say. Because in truth, they had never really been there to begin with. My dad left before I was born, Lily said simply. Mom doesn't talk about it much. She says some people are just broken in places they don't know how to fix. Ethan turned away, suddenly unable to hold her gaze. She continued, but she says we can still love people even if they're broken, as long as they don't break us too. He stood up abruptly. Do you want something to eat? Lily blinked. No, thank you. I had a sandwich earlier. He walked to the window, needing to put space between her voice and his thoughts. The city looked the same as always, cold, indifferent. But in this room, something was stirring. You ask too many questions, he said. My teacher says it's a good thing. She doesn't work for me. Lily grinned. And just like that, the tension cracked a little. She didn't ask more after that. She sat quietly, reading her book, legs still swinging. Ethan returned to his desk, but his mind wasn't on the numbers. It was on her words, on the things she said with such simplicity, and how they stayed with him in a way grown-up words never did. Don't you get lonely? Did you have a family? We can still love people, as long as they don't break us too. She didn't know what she was doing, or maybe she did. Either way, she was turning the silence inside him into something that had a sound. He just didn't know what to call it yet. The call came just after 7 p.m. Ethan was still at his desk, going over a quarterly report for a merger he no longer cared about, when his assistant knocked this time with a different look on her face. There's a call. It's from the emergency contact number Claire Summers gave us. It's her daughter. She sounds scared. He stood before he realized he had moved. Put her through. A moment later, Lily's voice filled the line, small, shaking. It's Mom. She was really dizzy. Then she fell. She's not waking up. The ambulance took her to the hospital. Ethan didn't ask which one. He already knew. There were only 2 emergency hospitals within 5 miles of Claire's apartment. He called the driver before hanging up, grabbed his coat, and was out the door. The hospital lights were unforgiving, fluorescent, cold. Nurses moved quickly, but not unkindly. Ethan spotted Lily immediately curled in a chair in the waiting area, her coat draped over her knees, her eyes wide and too dry, like the tears had already come and gone. She stood when she saw him. They won't tell me anything because I'm not grown up enough, she said. But they let me ride with her. She didn't wake up. Her hands were cold. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, unsure if it would comfort her or himself. I'll find out. The nurse recognized his face the moment he stepped up. Whether from magazines or boardroom stories, he didn't care. She gave him a short update. Claire had collapsed from the severe fatigue and a blood sugar crash. Her immune system, already compromised, hadn't recovered as much as anyone had hoped. They were stabilizing her. It would take time. He returned to the waiting area. Lily hadn't moved. She looked smaller than usual, the quietness around her a kind of shield. Ethan sat beside her, not speaking. After a while, she whispered, I thought she was getting better. She is, Ethan said, though he wasn't sure. But sometimes healing isn't a straight line. I was scared. He nodded. I know. Lily leaned sideways until her shoulder brushed his arm. I didn't know who else to call. He didn't reply right away. His throat felt tight. You did the right thing, he said finally. They sat that way for nearly an hour, Ethan with his phone silent in his lap, Lily with her head resting lightly against his side. When the doctor came out and gave the update, stable, resting, under observation for at least 24 hours, Lily exhaled the breath she'd been holding since the fall. Can I see her? She asked. The doctor hesitated, then nodded. Just for a few minutes. They led her down the hallway. Ethan followed. Claire lay on the bed, pale and still, a thin blanket drawn over her shoulders. Her face was turned toward the wall. A monitor beeped gently beside her. Lily walked to her mother's side, took her hand, and whispered something Ethan couldn't hear. He stood near the doorway, unsure if he should be there, yet unwilling to leave. Then Claire stirred. Slowly, her eyes opened. She turned her head and saw Lily, then saw Ethan behind her. Her lips parted, confused, then soft. "You came." Lily nodded. He drove fast. Claire's eyes moved to Ethan, tired but clear. "You didn't have to." "I know," he said, "but I did." She didn't speak after that. Her hand stayed in Lily's. Ethan looked around the room. No flowers, no photos, nothing personal, just machines and white walls. He didn't say it aloud, but the thought came anyway. This doesn't have to be her life forever. And for the first time, he started thinking beyond her job title, beyond roles and responsibility. He started thinking about what it meant to stay, not as a boss, not as a rescuer, but as something else, something that scared him more than he cared to admit. Claire slept through most of the night. Lily curled up in a reclining chair beside her mother's bed, finally drifting off after hours of holding her hand. The nurses offered to let Ethan leave, but he stayed silently, in a corner of the hospital room, coat folded under his arm, eyes fixed on the pale rise and fall of Claire's chest. It wasn't sympathy that held him there. It was something more complicated, something he didn't have a name for. Just before dawn, a nurse returned with Claire's small handbag recovered from the ambulance. Ethan took it and quietly began organizing the contents while Lily still slept. Inside was a small wallet, a bottle of medication, a handful of receipts, and a stack of papers folded unevenly and tucked into the back pocket. He almost didn't look, but one of the pages had handwriting that seemed too familiar, not just in form, but in feeling. Ethan pulled it out and read the first line. "To the boy I knew once before we had names, before we had anything but silence." He sat down. The letter was dated 3 years earlier. There were more behind it, 2, maybe 3 others. None were mailed, none even addressed. Just thoughts, written and hidden, like messages to ghosts. Claire had written to him, not to Ethan Ward, the CEO, but to him, the boy with no real last name, the one who had once shared cold soup on a metal bunk bed, the one who used to whisper stories into the dark to make her forget the hunger. In the letters, she wrote about the group home where they'd both lived until age 12, about the night he disappeared, taken by a rich couple from another city. She wrote about waiting for him to come back, how she told herself he was better off, but still hated that he left without goodbye. She wrote about the way life chipped at her after that. Foster homes, jobs that didn't last, men who didn't stay, the quiet rage of being forgotten. But the last letter, the last one was different. It was dated just 6 months ago. "I saw your face on a magazine cover. I knew it was you. Even after all these years, you're still trying not to smile. I didn't write to ask for anything, just to tell you I made it through. Lily's the best part of me, and if you remember anything about me, I hope it's not who I was in that place, but who I tried to be for you. I always believed you'd get out. I just didn't think it would be without me." Ethan folded the pages slowly, as if they might break. His chest ached. He remembered her now. Not just as Claire the applicant, not even as Lily's mother, but as the girl who once handed him half her sandwich when no one else had enough. The girl who took the punishment for something he did, just so he wouldn't lose his chance to be adopted. He had buried that memory, or maybe he'd let it fade, thinking it belonged to a past too distant to matter. But it mattered. He looked over at Claire again. Her face was relaxed, peaceful now, and beside her, Lily was still asleep, her fingers wrapped protectively around her mother's. A sudden warmth rose in his throat, guilt, awe, and something terrifyingly close to hope. He stood and stepped quietly into the hallway. The letters stayed in his pocket. He needed air, but more than that, he needed to figure out what to do with everything that had just come back to life. Because this wasn't about a job anymore. This was about a thread that had never really been cut, and the choice of whether or not he would finally stop pretending it didn't pull. 2 days after Christmas, Ethan took a drive he hadn't planned on. He didn't tell Claire, didn't tell Lily. He only left a short message with his assistant to hold his calls and cancel his meetings. Then he got in the car and gave the address to his driver, an address he hadn't spoken aloud in 25 years. The orphanage was gone, or at least, the building that once carried its name had been boarded up, half collapsed, overtaken by vines and weather. The old iron gate creaked as Ethan pushed it open, the sound strangely loud against the frozen air. He stood on the cracked stone path, staring at what was left of the place that had shaped the boy he used to be. The windows were broken, the front door hung crooked, a rusted tricycle lay on its side, half buried in the dirt. Time hadn't preserved the place. It had erased it slowly, without ceremony. Still, memories came back. The long hallways, the smell of cheap soap, the scratch of wool blankets, the silence after lights out, the sound of Claire humming beside him when sleep wouldn't come. He walked through what was left of the doorway. Inside, the walls had been stripped bare, paint peeled in long, curling ribbons. A broken chair sat in the middle of what used to be the dining hall. Dust floated through the beams of morning light like ash from a long-dead fire. Ethan wandered through each room, his footsteps echoing. In the corner of what had once been the dormitory, he found the metal bed frame still bolted to the wall. He traced a hand across 1/3 from the back. His bed. He sat down on the edge of the rusted frame, suddenly exhausted. He remembered Claire sitting across from him on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, daring him to smile. She was always braver. She asked questions. She made jokes even when the food was cold and the rules unfair. And then one day he was gone, adopted, moved, promised something better. He never wrote back. He told himself, back then, that it was cleaner that way, that if he let himself remember, he'd never move forward. But moving forward without remembering hadn't brought him peace, just success, just distance. Now, as he sat in the ruins of his beginning, he realized something: you can't outrun where you came from if the place still lives inside you. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a single photograph, him and Claire at 10 years old, sitting on a step, both looking away from the camera. Someone had taken it during a summer field trip. He barely remembered the photo being taken, but Claire had kept it. She had tucked it into the back of the notebook. Ethan placed the photograph on the old bed frame, then stood. At the far end of the property, near the trees, was a row of markers, simple stones, no names, just memories. He walked there next. One of the stones belonged to the woman who had run the orphanage, Miss Harlow, a cold, precise woman who taught rules before kindness. Ethan had feared her, but oddly now, he felt no hate, only the stillness of a time that no longer held power over him. He stood before her grave and said nothing for a long time. Then, finally, you taught me how to survive, but someone else taught me how to live. And I should have remembered that sooner. When he left the orphanage grounds, the sky had changed. The sun was rising behind the old buildings, casting light where shadows had lived for decades. Ethan didn't look back. Some ghosts don't need to be defeated. They only need to be acknowledged so they can rest, and you can finally walk free. January came in quiet and cold. Snow piled gently on city sidewalks, and the world seemed to slow down beneath its weight. Inside the apartment, Claire moved with more strength each day. Her cheeks carried color again. The shaking in her hands had stopped. She still tired easily, but now she could walk Lily to school in the morning and finish a full dinner without sitting down between tasks. Recovery, it turned out, was not a straight path, but it was hers. Ethan visited often, though he never stayed long. He brought groceries, checked in after doctor's appointments, sometimes just sat on the edge of the kitchen table while Claire made tea. There was a rhythm forming between them. No declarations, no pressure, just the quiet return of something real. One afternoon, Claire came into his office unannounced, confident in a way she hadn't been weeks before. "I read the reports," she said, setting down a file. "You've got two divisions working in complete opposition to each other's goals. If you want efficiency, you need someone who can fix that without turning it into a war." Ethan looked up from his desk, caught off guard. Claire met his gaze directly. "I'm ready to work." He closed the laptop. "You already are." "No," she said. "I mean for real, full capacity, not as someone you're helping or someone still catching her breath. I've done the work. I know this company. I've been studying it every night after Lily goes to sleep. I don't want a title that makes people whisper when I walk by. I want the one I earn." He stood slowly. "What are you asking for Chief Operating Officer?" she said. Silence stretched. He looked at her, really looked. She wasn't asking for a favor. She was offering herself fully, not out of desperation, but out of clarity. "You're asking for a seat beside me. I'm asking for the seat I was meant to grow into." He walked around the desk and handed her the file she had brought. "You're not wrong about those two divisions. I rarely am." A beat passed. "You think the board will accept it?" she asked. "I do," he said, "because I will." She blinked. "Just like that." "Not just like that," Ethan replied. "It took years of life, of failure, of almost missing this." Claire stepped forward, softer now. "You know this isn't just about business, right?" He nodded. "I do." They didn't say more, but something passed between them in that moment. Not romance, not yet, not in the way people imagine it, but understanding, depth, a shared history that ran too deep to explain to anyone else. That night, Claire returned home to Lily and told her the news. Her daughter smiled, big and real, then crawled into her lap with a whispered, "Told you they'd see who you are." Claire held her close. She had been many things in her life, tired, unseen, underestimated, but now she was something new. She was ready, whole, not in spite of what she'd endured, but because of it. And for the first time in a long, long while, the future didn't feel like something far away. It felt like something she was already standing in. The boardroom was filled with polished shoes, pressed suits, and the sound of polite skepticism. Claire stood at the far end of the table, the city skyline behind her. The room was long, sunlit, quiet, but the silence wasn't empty. It was charged, expectant. Some of these executives had worked under Ethan for years. Others barely concealed their doubt. Claire had no formal business degree, no corporate background, no pristine resume. What she had were results and Ethan's full support. Ethan sat beside her, not in front of her. That, more than anything, had already said enough. Still, Claire spoke clearly, with her spine straight and her voice calm. She walked them through her proposal departmental restructuring, cross-team alignment, talent retention strategies. She answered every question thrown at her, Not with rehearsed jargon, but with hard-earned insight. When one director asked why she thought she was qualified to lead at this level, she paused before replying, "Because I know what it means to build something when you have nothing. I know how to stretch limited resources, how to listen, how to lead without ego. Most of my experience isn't in glass towers, it's in the real world. And that's exactly the kind of leadership we've forgotten how to value." Some of the men looked at their notes. One or two nodded, but most just listened, unsure how to respond. Claire closed the folder in front of her. "I'm not asking for a chance out of mercy. I'm asking because I've earned it. If that makes anyone uncomfortable, I'd suggest you consider why." She sat down. Silence followed, then a few low murmurs. A question about her timeline, another about staffing, but the decision, really, had already been made. Later that day, Ethan stepped into her new office, holding the signed letter of appointment. "Chief Operating Officer," he said, setting it gently on the desk. Unanimous vote. Claire stared at it, not because she doubted it, but because some moments feel too still to be real. She touched the paper as if to test its texture. "You sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my career." A small smile curved at her mouth. "Well, then I guess I better get started." Ethan watched her a moment longer. "Lily'll want to celebrate. She already did. She made a cake out of toast this morning, covered it in peanut butter and wrote, 'Coo' and raisins." He chuckled. "Genius." Claire leaned back in her chair, eyes soft. "You know, I used to write this dream down like it was a story someone else would live. Now I'm living it, and I still don't quite believe it's mine." "It's yours," Ethan said simply. That evening, they all met at the office rooftop: Claire, Ethan, Lily, and a handful of staff who had come to believe in the woman who rose without asking permission. There were no press releases, no cameras, just laughter, warm drinks, and quiet music playing from a small Bluetooth speaker Lily had borrowed from a neighbor. At one point, Claire stepped away from the group and looked out over the city. Ethan joined her. "You thinking about what's next?" She nodded. "Always." He tilted his head. "You scared?" She looked at him. Steady. "No, not anymore." And in that moment, under soft rooftop lights and the open sky, the girl who had once been forgotten stood fully in her name, her power, and her purpose. It hadn't been given to her. She had built it, from the ground up, and now she would never give it back. The car slowed at the edge of the old cul-de-sac. Winter sun stretched long shadows across cracked pavement. The houses here had aged without care, flaking paint, sagging fences, but one house at the very end stood out, still tall, still quiet, still empty. Ethan stepped out first. Claire followed, bundled in a wool coat, her breath catching slightly in the cold. Lily jumped out last, tugging at her scarf, eyes wide with curiosity. "Whose house is this?" she asked, skipping a few steps ahead. Ethan didn't answer right away. He stared at the porch, the way the windows stared back like hollow eyes. "It used to belong to my adoptive parents," he said quietly. Claire turned to him, surprised. "You never mentioned them. They're not around anymore. Haven't been for years. But I held on to the house. I told myself I might sell it. Then I told myself I might tear it down." He paused. "But I never did either." He walked up the steps and unlocked the front door. Inside, the house was cold, but clean. Empty walls, covered furniture, hardwood floors that echoed under every step. Lily wandered from room to room, her voice bouncing off the high ceilings. "It's like a castle." Mom Claire smiled but said nothing. Her hand rested lightly on the staircase rail. It feels haunted, not by ghosts, Ethan said, just by everything I tried not to remember. They moved through the house slowly. A study with heavy curtains, a bedroom with a cracked mirror, a kitchen still holding spices that had long lost their scent. It was a house full of things, but no warmth, no life. Until Lily opened the back door and found the sunlight. There's a garden, she called. It's all frozen now, but there's space. Can we plant flowers here in the spring? Ethan stepped out beside her. You can plant whatever you want. She looked up at him. Even carrots, he smiled. Especially carrots. Claire came outside last, her footsteps quiet on the deck. Why bring us here? She asked softly. Ethan didn't answer right away. He took something from his coat pocket, a set of keys. He turned to her and held them out. Because it's not a house anymore, he said. Not to me. It's just a place, but it could be more. If it had the right people in it. Claire stared at the keys, not touching them. Ethan, I don't want to live here alone, he said. And I don't want to keep carrying a past that never gave me a home. But if you and Lily, if you wanted, Claire stepped forward, eyes searching his face. Are you asking us to move in? No, not, he said. I'm asking if we can build something together. Here, not because we need each other, but because we choose each other. The silence stretched. Lily, standing between them, grinned wide. So we live in a castle and have a garden that's basically a fairy tale. Claire finally took the keys. Her fingers closed around them like she was holding something fragile and sacred. She looked at Ethan, voice low. This doesn't feel like the end. It's not, he said. It's the beginning. And so, on a quiet winter day, in the stillness of a house that had waited too long to feel like home, 3 people stepped into a story that no longer began in loss, but in choice. There were no fireworks, no dramatic music, just the sound of boots crunching snow, the squeak of the front door opening wide, and the warmth of something neither of them had dared to name. Family, not perfect, not traditional, but real. And for once, real was more than enough.